The data slate felt heavier than its meager mass suggested. Dr. Lyra Vale, adjunct professor of interspecies diplomacy at the Galactic Academy, held it between two of her four delicate, chitin-plated fingers. The title on the holographic display seemed to stare back at her with a cold, analytical glare. Stability Through Selective Fear, a comparative analysis of pre-stellar and early-stellar political structures. Its author was Alex Ryder, the Academy's first and only human exchange student. A curiosity, a diplomatic gambit by the Terran Confederacy, a fledgling member of the Galactic Concordat, eager to prove its species was ready for the galactic stage. Lyra's primary optical sensors, which perceived the visible light spectrum, saw only the crisp academic text. But her secondary sensory organs, the delicate, feathery antennae that fringed her jawline, tasted the emotional residue clinging to the document. A faint, metallic tang of ambition so pure and cold it was almost sterile. It was an emotion she had rarely encountered, and never with such dispassionate intensity. She keyed the intercom on her desk, its surface a swirling nebula of captured light. "Proctor Kalen, do you have a moment to review a thesis submission? It's unusual." A deep, gravelly voice, layered with the subharmonics of a Cathar warrior scholar, rumbled back. "Unusual how, Lyra? Has a Hululu finally written a treatise on the philosophical importance of interpretive dance? I'm busy calibrating the combat simulators for the practical exams." "I am sending it to you now," she said, bypassing his attempt at levity. "It is the submission from the human writer." There was a pause. The Cathar were a species that valued directness and strength above all else. Subtlety was, to them, a form of intellectual cowardice. Lyra could almost hear the High Proctor's massive, leonine head tilting in thought, his rock-like brow furrowed. "The primate. Very well." Lyra leaned back, her slender, six-limbed frame folding gracefully into her bioformed chair. The human was an enigma. He was polite, deferential, and possessed an intellect that was, frankly, astonishing. He had absorbed xenolinguistics, galactic history, and theoretical physics with an unnerving speed. But there was a stillness to him, a predatory calm that was fundamentally alien to the bustling, emotionally transparent species that filled the Academy's halls. While others gestured, chirped, or flared their cranial crests to communicate, Alex Ryder would simply watch, his binocular vision focused, his expression a placid mask. Her terminal chimed, indicating Kalen had opened the file. She waited. The silence stretched, long enough for her to note the gentle hum of the life support systems cycling the Academy's precisely mixed atmosphere. The Cathar were not known for their speed in reading, preferring a slow, deliberate consumption of information. Yet the response came in under 3 minutes. By the first ancestor's claw, Kalen's voice was stripped of its earlier flippancy. It was flat, hard. "This is not a thesis. It is a manual for tyranny." "Was my assessment as well," Lyra said, her antennae twitching. "He posits that all stable societies, including the Galactic Concordat, are not built on mutual trust or shared benefit, but on a carefully balanced system of fear. The fear of external threats, fear of societal collapse, fear of the other. He argues that the Concordat's long peace is not a sign of its success, but its greatest vulnerability, a period of fear atrophy that has left it dangerously complacent." "It's preposterous," Kalen growled, though his tone lacked conviction. He cites his own species' barbaric history as his primary data set. The Pax Romana, the Cold War, these are not models for enlightened governance. They are chronicles of savagery. "Calls them proofs of concept," Lyra corrected softly. He argues that a leader's primary tool is not inspiration, but the calculated application of fear against specific segments of a population to unify the rest. "Selective fear," he calls it. "Create an internal enemy to solidify the whole. Foment a manageable crisis to justify the consolidation of power. It's chillingly logical in its own sociopathic way." "It's the work of a juvenile mind trying to be provocative," Kalen dismissed, a little too quickly. "He's a cub testing his teeth. Let him defend it. The faculty will tear his premises to shreds. It will be a valuable, humbling lesson for our young primate." Lyra was not so sure. Humility did not seem to be a part of Alex Ryder's emotional spectrum. "And if he defends it successfully, he will not," Kalen stated with finality. The Concordat is built on 200,000 years of consensus. A single, hairless primate from a death world is not going to unravel it with a history paper. Approve it for defense, Lyra. Let us see what he is made of. Lyra gave the formal assent, but a deep unease settled in her core. She had a feeling they were all about to find out exactly what Alex Rider was made of. Alex received the approval notification with a faint, almost imperceptible smile. He sat not in the Grand Academy library, but in a small, private data nook he'd requisitioned, the walls insulated against both sound and empathic resonance. On his main screen was the faculty's acceptance. On a secondary screen, a complex network diagram of the Academy's student political structure pulsed softly. The thesis was the theory. Now came the practical application. The field test. His first target was Grack, the thick-skulled, honor-bound leader of the Grok Student Security Caucus. The Grok were a species of hulking, silicon-based lifeforms bred for loyalty and combat. They saw themselves as the unofficial protectors of the Academy, a role that mostly involved breaking up minor scuffles between incompatible species and looking imposing. They were respected, but not particularly influential. Alex found Grack in the zero-gravity gymnasium, spotting for a fellow Grok who was bench-pressing a small asteroid. Alex waited patiently, a stark contrast in his simple gray tunic against the raw geological power of the Grok. "Grack," Alex said, his voice pitched to be heard over the grunts of exertion. The Grok turned, his crystalline eyes focusing slowly. "Human Rider, I have a moment of your time?" Alex asked, his posture open and non-threatening. "It concerns Academy security," Grack grunted, signaling his friend to rack the weight. "The faculty handles security. The Grok caucus assists." "Precisely," Alex said smoothly. "You assist, you react, you don't anticipate, you don't prevent." This struck a nerve. The Grok concept of honor was tied to proactivity. "We are vigilant," Grack rumbled defensively. "Are you?" Alex held up a data slate. "Are you aware that the Lurian Technocracy Guild has been petitioning the Student Alliance Council to divert a portion of the physical security budget to their data security initiatives? They argue that cyber threats are more pressing than physical ones." He paused. "They are arguing that your role is becoming obsolete." Grack's massive form stiffened. The Lurians were insectoid, hive-minded beings who ran the Academy's networks. To the Grok, they were flimsy, chittering things who couldn't lift their own weight. The idea of them siphoning resources was an insult. Lurian lies, they hide in their server rooms, they do not walk the halls. "Of course," Alex agreed. "But they are masters of information. They control the narrative. While you patrol the corridors, they are fighting a political battle you are not even aware of. You are losing a war you did not know you were in." Let that sink in. He was creating an enemy, a clear, identifiable other that threatened the Grok's status and purpose. "What would you have us do, human?" Grack's voice was a low growl of frustration. "Assert your relevance," Alex said, his tone now that of a helpful advisor. "I've taken the liberty of cross-referencing Academy incident reports with patrol schedules. I've found inefficiencies, gaps, windows of opportunity for those who might wish to cause disruption." He presented the data to Grack. It was all true but contextually manipulated. Minor incidents were magnified, patterns implied where none existed. "I propose a new patrol matrix, more visible, more assertive, proactive, not reactive. You should submit it to the council. A show of strength and foresight. It will make the Lurians' proposal look self-serving and disconnected from the reality of student safety." Grack studied the matrix, his slow mind grappling with the data. It looked impressive. It looked honorable. "This is effective." "I am merely a student of systems, Grack," Alex said with a self-deprecating shrug. "You are the one who can implement it." Within 2 days, the Grok caucus began their new patrols. They moved in larger groups, their heavy footfalls echoing in the corridors. They began questioning students who were out after designated study hours. There was a new tension on campus, a low-grade current of unease. The Grok felt important. The rest of the student body felt watched. Alex's second target was the polar opposite of the Grok, Sela, the lead delegate for the Cygnian diplomatic corps. The Cygnians were an avian species, elegant and cerebral, with iridescent feathers and voices like wind chimes. They prided themselves on their ability to mediate and de-escalate. They were, in a word, pacifists. Alex arranged a meeting with Sela in one of the Academy's arboretums, under the gentle glow of a captive nebula. "Delegate Sela," Alex began, "I come to you with a concern." Sela preened a shimmering wing feather. "The Academy is full of concerns, Mr. Ryder. It is a crucible of cultures. Friction is inevitable." "This is more than friction," Alex said, his voice low and serious. "Have you noticed the increased Grok presence? Their assertiveness," Sela's head tilted, "it is somewhat robust, but the Grok are dedicated to security." "Their version of it," Alex countered. "But their methods are creating an atmosphere of intimidation. I have heard whispers. Students from less physically imposing species feel threatened. The gaseous sentients of Rigel 7 are particularly distressed by the sudden pressure changes from their patrols." This was a calculated strike. The Cygnians saw themselves as champions of the delicate and the gentle. The thought of the lumbering, Grok terrifying wispy gas beings was offensive to their core principles. "Their mandate is to provide security, not anxiety," Sela trilled, a sharp edge to her voice. "Indeed," Alex nodded. "But who will speak for those they intimidate? The Council is slow. By the time they debate the issue, the damage to the Academy's spirit of open community will be done. A counter-narrative is needed. A voice for peace and de-escalation." He presented her with another data slate, this one filled with anonymous, highly emotional testimonies from students frightened by the Grok. He had fabricated most of them. "This is unacceptable," Sela declared, her crest feathers ruffling in agitation. "So, do something," Alex urged. "The Cygnians are the voice of reason here. Form a coalition. The Alliance for Interspecies Harmony. Petition the Council. Demand oversight for the Grok patrols. Propose mandatory de-escalation training for all security personnel. Frame it not as an attack on the Grok, but as a defense of the Academy's highest ideals." He was offering her a noble cause, a chance to be the hero, while simultaneously deepening the rift he had created. He was turning one of his pawns against the other. Within a week, Sela's Alliance for Interspecies Harmony was the talk of the campus. Their eloquent speeches and impassioned pleas stood in stark contrast to the Grok's silent, intimidating presence. The student body was polarizing. You were either for security or for harmony. The middle ground was evaporating. Alex's final key move was on the Lurians themselves. He didn't approach them with fear, but with the one thing they truly valued: data. He requested an audience with Zen, the designated speaker for the Lurian Hive Mind Collective on campus. They met in the humming core of the Academy's primary server farm, the air thick with the scent of ozone and cooling fluid. Zen, a spindly, multi-jointed being, communicated in a series of rapid clicks and synthesized speech. "Your request was algorithmically intriguing, human writer. You have consumed an anomalous amount of data on student resource allocation. I believe the current system is inefficient," Alex stated plainly. "And I believe you know it too." He brought up a holographic display between them, showing the flow of resources, budgets, and influence within the Student Alliance Council. It was a chaotic mess of overlapping interests and bureaucratic redundancies. "The Council operates on emotion and political posturing," Alex said. "The Cygnians appeal to sentiment, the Grok appeal to fear. The result is suboptimal. A waste of energy and resources. A known variable," Zen clicked. "Organic decision-making is inherently flawed." "Then let's introduce a superior logic," Alex proposed. "I have designed a new framework. A resource allocation protocol based on quantifiable metrics. A faction's contribution to academic excellence, its logistical footprint, its efficiency in achieving stated goals. A system of pure merit." He showed the Lurian a complex, elegant algorithm. It was beautiful in its cold logic. It promised to cut through the political noise and distribute power and resources based on pure, unadulterated data. And buried deep within its code were variables that would subtly favor factions that demonstrated stability and order, metrics that Alex himself was now manipulating across the campus. The system was designed to reward those who fell in line with his burgeoning network. "The Council would never adopt this," Zen stated. "It bypasses their authority." "If you don't present it as a replacement," Alex said, leaning in. Present it as an advisory tool, a service provided by the Technocracy Guild to help the council make more informed decisions. Offer your processing power to run the numbers. Once they begin to rely on your data, they will become dependent on your system. You will not be taking power, they will be ceding it to you. You will become the logical core of the entire student political structure. The Lurians, who had always been relegated to the role of glorified IT support, were being offered a path to becoming the secret architects of campus policy. The appeal was irresistible. Zen's multifaceted eyes spun. The logic is sound. The protocol is optimal. We will consider your proposal. Within 3 weeks, Alex Ryder held no official position. He was not on the council, nor was he the head of any caucus. Yet, he was the most powerful student in the Galactic Academy. The Grok controlled the physical space, and they listened to him. The Cygnians controlled the moral narrative, and they listened to him. The Lurians controlled the flow of information and resources, and they listened to him. He had pitted them against each other, creating a system of checks and balances where he was the central fulcrum. He had proven the first part of his thesis. A stable power structure could be built not on unity, but on managed, interlocking fears. Fear of obsolescence, fear of intimidation, fear of inefficiency. And now the campus was stable. It was orderly. It was also suffocating. The vibrant, chaotic intellectual hub had become a place of whispers, sidelong glances, and quiet suspicion. Dr. Lyra Vale felt the change in her very bones. The emotional landscape of the academy, once a symphony of diverse feelings, had flattened into a monotonous, low-frequency hum of anxiety. The joy of discovery, the passion of debate, the camaraderie of shared learning, all were being dampened by a pervasive, unspoken tension. She didn't need her empathic senses to see the symptoms. The Grok patrols, once a reassuring presence, now marched with a chilling sense of purpose. The Cygnians' calls for harmony had taken on a shrill, almost hysterical tone, their peace rallies feeling more like protests against an unseen oppression. The Academy's administration, guided by the Lurians' efficiency reports, had become strangely bureaucratic, implementing new rules and regulations that prioritized order over inspiration. It all traced back to one source. Alex Ryder. She requested his presence in her office, the same office where she had first read his thesis. When he arrived, he looked no different, calm, polite, his dark eyes holding a placid depth. "Mr. Ryder," Lyra began, foregoing the usual pleasantries, "we need to talk about your thesis." "I would be happy to, Professor," he replied, taking the offered seat. "I am scheduled to defend it in 2 weeks before the faculty board and the High Proctor." "I am not talking about your defense. I am talking about your field testing," she said, her voice sharp. The word hung in the air between them. Alex did not flinch. He simply raised an eyebrow. "I'm not sure I understand. I have been focusing on my studies." "Have you?" Lyra leaned forward, her antennae quivering slightly. "The Grok caucus is now operating based on a proactive security matrix that bears a striking resemblance to a model you proposed in a paper for my interspecies conflict seminar. The Alliance for Interspecies Harmony, led by the Cygnians, is basing its entire platform on data points and anonymous testimonies that I now suspect originated with you. And the Student Council is becoming increasingly reliant on a Lurian advisory protocol that, sources tell me, was designed by a human exchange student with a keen interest in systems theory. The campus is polarizing, Mr. Ryder. It is becoming a reflection of the toxic principles outlined in your paper." Alex listened patiently, his hands resting calmly in his lap. When she finished, he nodded slowly. "You have been thorough, Professor. I would expect nothing less." His casual admission was more shocking than any denial. He wasn't even trying to hide it. "You admit it." Lyra felt a flicker of alien anger, a hot spark in her cool, logical mind. "You have been manipulating student organizations, fomenting discord, and turning this institution into a laboratory for your repellent theories." "Repellent?" Alex's expression shifted, just a fraction. It was not guilt, but something closer to disappointment. "Professor, with all due respect, you and the Concordat view the universe through a lens of cultivated naivete. You believe that peace is the natural state of existence. My species learned, through millennia of bloodshed, that peace is the exception. It is a temporary, fragile state that can only be maintained through constant vigilance and, yes, control. Is not control, Lyra countered, gesturing vaguely towards the window, towards the campus he had reshaped. That is oppression. You have made students afraid of each other. I have made them aware, he corrected. The Grok were complacent, the Signians were ineffectual, the Lurians were underutilized. I gave them purpose. I gave them focus. And in doing so, I exposed the fragility of the previous system. Look at the results. Incidents of interfaction violence are down 83%. Vandalism is at 0. Academic output, according to the Lurians' metrics, is up 12% in focus study groups. The system is more stable. It is safer. It is a prison, Lyra hissed. All societies are prisons, Professor, Alex said, his voice dropping to an almost hypnotic cadence. Some just have more comfortable walls. You prefer the illusion of freedom, the chaos of unchecked emotion. I prefer the tangible security of a system where everyone knows their place, where threats are managed and order is paramount. My thesis is not a manual for tyranny. It's a blueprint for survival in a hostile universe. The Concordat, with its endless debates and cultural sensitivities, is a beautiful, decadent, dying beast. It cannot defend itself against a truly determined foe, a foe that doesn't play by its rules. Lyra felt a chill that had nothing to do with the room's temperature. He wasn't just talking about the Academy anymore. He was talking about the galaxy, about the Terran Confederacy, about humanity. Was this his idea or was it theirs? You are just one student, Alex, she said, trying to regain her footing. An anomalous data point. Am I? He asked, a genuine question in his eyes. Humanity clawed its way to the top of its planet's food chain not by being the strongest or the fastest, but by being the most adaptable, the most cooperative, and the most ruthless predator the world had ever seen. We domesticated our prey, and we exterminated our rivals. We built civilizations on the bones of those who opposed us. We learned that the only lasting peace is the peace you impose. You call my methods repellent. I call them instinct. The conversation was over. He had won the debate. Lyra sat in stunned silence as he politely excused himself, leaving her with the terrifying realization that Alex Ryder was not a sociopath. He was worse. He was a true believer. She went directly to High Proctor Kalen. She found him in the armory, stripping and reassembling a Cathar plasma rifle with practiced ease. The air smelled of weapons grease and ozone. She recounted her conversation with Ryder, her voice tight with urgency. Kalen listened without stopping his work, his massive hands moving with surprising dexterity. When she was finished, he slammed the rifle's power cell into place with a definitive crack. So the cub has fangs, he rumbled, his golden eyes burning with a cold fire. I underestimated him, a mistake I will not make again. Believes what he's doing is right, Lyra said. He sees us as weak, Kalen, decadent. He's trying to prove that his way is superior. Way is the way of the jackal, snapping at the heels of the herd, Kalen growled. It is not the way of a leader. A leader protects all, not just the ones who are useful. He stood, towering over her. You were right, Lyra. This has gone beyond an academic exercise. An incident a few days prior had already primed him. A small, peaceful protest against the Grok patrols, organized by a group of silicon-based crystalline beings, had been dispersed. Grak's caucus, acting on an advisory from Ryder about potential for escalation, had used sonic dampeners to scatter them. The method was efficient, non-lethal, and utterly soul-crushing. To a warrior like Kalen, who valued courage and facing one's opponent, this preemptive, cowardly suppression of dissent was the highest form of dishonor. It was not strength. It was bullying. What do we do? Lyra asked. We can't expel him. The Terran Confederacy would see it as a political slight. We have no concrete proof of wrongdoing, only a web of influence that he could easily deny. Kalen stared past her, his gaze fixed on the rows of ceremonial weapons that lined the armory walls. He wants to prove his theory. He is scheduled to defend his thesis in 2 weeks, and the final, practical component of that defense is the coup simulation. The coup simulation was the capstone exercise for students in the political and military strategy tracks. A high-stakes, high-fidelity war game where factions vied for control of a simulated version of the Academy. It was the ultimate test of leadership, strategy, and diplomacy. "We will let him have his test," Kalen said, a predatory grin spreading across his face, revealing formidable canines. "You and I will design the scenario. We will give him his allied factions, the Grok, the Signians, the Lurians. We will put him in command. And we will craft a scenario so complex, so fraught with peril and unforeseen variables, that his rigid fear-based system will shatter under the strain. We will force him to confront the failure of his philosophy in front of the entire faculty. We will not just defeat him, Lyra, we will humiliate him." Lyra felt a flicker of hope, but it was tinged with fear. "We are using the Academy's most advanced simulation as a tool to crush a student's spirit." "Are using the Master's tools to dismantle the Master's house," Kalen corrected, his voice a low growl of anticipation. "He thinks this is a game he can control. It's time we reminded him that the game has masters." They went to the Academy Dean, a centuries-old, wizened being from a species that had seen empires rise and fall. They laid out their plan. The Dean, deeply troubled by the reports of Ryder's influence but constrained by diplomatic protocol, reluctantly agreed. The simulation would be the final arbiter. It would be Ryder's stage, but they would write the play. It was a gamble. A dangerous, arrogant gamble, born of the belief that they, the wise and experienced elders, could outwit the clever, dangerous primate. It was a miscalculation of catastrophic proportions. The day of the final examination arrived. The air in the simulation observation chamber was thick with anticipation. The chamber was a large, amphitheater-style room with a multi-tiered viewing gallery overlooking a vast, holographic space. Below, student teams in their Neuralink chairs were already plugged into the simulation, their bodies still while their minds waged war. Dr. Lyra Vale stood beside High Proctor Kalen, their forms silhouetted against the swirling cosmos of the main display. The entire senior faculty was present, along with the dean. This was more than an exam, it was a reckoning. "The scenario is loaded," Kalen rumbled, his voice low enough for only Lyra to hear. "Crisis Cascade. The Concordat has recalled its fleet from this sector due to a sudden stellar phenomenon, leaving the Academy isolated. Simultaneously, a radical splinter group, the Purifiers, controlled by our most aggressive tactical AI, has declared its intent to cleanse the Academy of alien influence. Communications are down. The Academy is on its own. And Ryder?" Lyra asked, her antennae twitching nervously. "He leads the Unity faction," Kalen replied, a grim satisfaction in his tone. "His coalition. Grok security forces, Signian diplomatic corps, and Lurian technical support. He must hold the Academy against the Purifier onslaught while managing the internal needs and fears of a dozen other neutral student factions. We have programmed the neutral factions to be panicked, selfish, and prone to rioting. His model of selective fear will fail. If he clamps down too hard, he'll face a rebellion from within. If he's too lenient, the Purifiers will pick him apart. It is a no-win scenario. He will be forced to learn the value of genuine trust and inspiration, or he will fail." The main screen, the simulation began. The Academy grounds were rendered in perfect, glowing detail. Red icons representing the Purifier forces began to appear at the perimeter. Blue icons showed Ryder's Unity faction. White icons were the panicking neutral groups. Alex Ryder's response was immediate and terrifyingly efficient. There was no hesitation. "Observe," Kalen muttered. His first move. Ryder did not deploy the Grok to the perimeter to meet the enemy. Instead, he sent them to the neutral faction's dormitories. Within the simulation, Grak's forces established protective cordons, effectively placing the neutral students under house arrest. It was a brutal, decisive move. "He's quarantining the civilian population," a professor of military history murmured in surprise. "Bold. He's ignoring the threat of revolt to focus on the external enemy." Next, Ryder deployed the Signians, not as diplomats but as propagandists. Seela's team began broadcasting messages, not of harmony, but of terror. They amplified the Purifier's threats, showed fabricated atrocity footage, generated by the Lurian AIs under Alex's command, and painted a picture of certain doom for any who did not fall in line with the Unity faction. It was a masterful use of psychological warfare. He wasn't calming the neutral factions, he was terrifying them into submission. "By the void," Lyra whispered. He was using the Signians' talent for emotional communication to spread fear, not peace. The Lurians, meanwhile, were not just running logistics. They initiated a total information lockdown. They severed all communication channels between the neutral factions, ensuring they couldn't organize. Each group was isolated, alone, and fed a constant stream of Signian-produced terror propaganda. With the internal situation brutally stabilized, Ryder finally turned his attention to the purifiers. He used the Grok not as a defensive line, but as bait. He sacrificed entire squads in feigned retreats, luring the AI-controlled purifiers into carefully prepared kill zones. He used the Academy's infrastructure, power conduits, life support systems, maintenance tunnels, as weapons, turning the campus into a death trap. He was fighting dirty. There was no honor, no glorious battle, only cold, ruthless efficiency. The faculty watched in stunned silence. He wasn't failing. He was winning. He had taken their impossible scenario and solved it by throwing out their entire rulebook. He wasn't trying to win the hearts and minds of the neutral factions. He had neutralized them as a variable. He wasn't meeting the enemy with strength. He was bleeding them with cunning. "He's not breaking," Kalen said, his voice a tight, disbelieving knot of sound. "His system is working." "It's working because this is a simulation," Lyra countered, though her own confidence was shaken. In reality, the cruelty of his methods would inspire a real rebellion. The spirit cannot be so easily crushed. On the screen, Ryder's forces were pushing the purifiers back. He had weathered the storm and was on the verge of a decisive victory. The simulation was scheduled to end in 10 minutes. A sense of grim defeat settled over the observation chamber. They had failed. Ryder had proven his point. Then Alex Ryder's voice, calm and clear, echoed through the chamber's speakers. It was not his simulated voice. It was his real one. "Professor Vale, High Proctor Kalen, members of the faculty, thank you for this educational exercise. You have created a most instructive scenario. However, your simulation contains a fatal flaw." Every head in the chamber snapped towards the control booth, but Alex wasn't there. His Neuralink chair was empty. Kalen barked into his comm unit. "Security report. Where is Student Ryder?" Ryder's voice continued, unhurried. "Your flaw was the assumption that the game was confined to the simulation. You were so focused on the battle inside the box, you failed to watch the board itself." The main screen, the simulation vanished. It was replaced by a live security feed. It showed the Academy's real central communications hub. Standing at the main console were not Lurian students, but Grak and a team of his most loyal Grok, clad in real armor. They were not in Neuralink chairs. They had been his real-world asset all along. "What is this?" the dean demanded, his ancient voice trembling. Another security feed flashed onto the screen. The main transport nexus, locked down. Another feed, the armory, sealed. Another, the reactor core, secured, all by Grok forces. "While you were engrossed in my final examination," Alex's voice explained, "my real forces executed a simple, quiet plan. The simulation was not the test. It was the distraction, the ultimate misdirection." The lights in the observation chamber flickered and died, plunging them into darkness. Only the eerie glow of the monitors remained. Red emergency alerts began to flash across the screens. "Academy lockdown initiated Central Command, COMPROMICD all faculty authority, OVERRIDDEN then." The main screen lit up again. It was a video feed from the dean's own office. Alex Ryder sat in the dean's high-backed chair, his hands steepled before him. He looked calm, composed. He looked like he belonged there. "Protocol 0 is complete," Alex said, his voice no longer that of a student but of a man in command. "The Galactic Academy is now under my administrative authority for the duration of this security crisis." Kalen let out a roar of pure, unadulterated rage, slamming his fist against the console. It cracked under the blow. "This isn't real, it's a bluff, a final, arrogant gesture." "Is it, Proctor?" Alex asked. He gestured off-screen. Two Grok troopers entered the frame, flanking the terrified, trembling form of the Academy Dean. "I assure you the consequences are very real. I have control of life support, communications, security, and transport. This campus is now the most secure, stable environment in the sector." Lyra stared at the screen, her mind struggling to process the enormity of what had happened. The thesis, the student manipulations, the faculty's arrogant counterplan, it had all been a prelude, a meticulously executed campaign. The staged coup simulation had been the camouflage for a real one. "What do you want, Ryder?" she asked, her voice a strained whisper, yet it carried in the silent room. Alex's eyes found the camera, and for a moment, Lyra felt he was looking right at her. "What I have been advocating for all along, Professor," he said, his voice devoid of malice, filled only with an unnerving, absolute certainty. "Stability. I have exposed a critical vulnerability in the Academy's defenses, a failure of imagination at the highest levels of leadership. My actions were not an attack, but a necessary, practical demonstration. A lesson. Now I am formally requesting an emergency session of the Faculty Senate and the Student Council to discuss these security failings and to propose a new, more robust system of governance." He wasn't a ranting madman. He wasn't a conqueror claiming his prize. He was a political operator who had manufactured a crisis to which he was now providing the only solution. He hadn't just seized power. He had created the political justification for being given it. In the dark observation chamber, surrounded by the greatest minds of a dozen species, Lyra Vale finally understood. Alex hadn't just proven his thesis. He had made the entire Galactic Academy a part of its bloody conclusion. She looked at the faces around her, shock, fear, impotent fury. They were the first citizens of a new order, an order built on the simple, terrifying principle that Alex Ryder had laid out from the very beginning. The surest path to power was not to win the people's love, but to command their fear. And in the silent, locked-down halls of the galaxy's most enlightened institution, fear reigned supreme. The human had arrived.